What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. All right, get to our mailbag. Hey, Jason, love the show. Love the quantity and quality. It keeps my screen time unfortunately high. The Celtics have had these lulls all season that are almost always followed up with a 30 to 40 point dominating win. Is that a sign that they truly can just turn it on, or do you think it's just inconsistency? I think it's a sign that they can turn it on. Don't get me wrong, like there's some mental demons here in terms of like decision-making demons. I talked a lot about that this morning, the idea of settling. Basically, like to me, settling is just attacking a mismatch with a jump shot versus attacking a mismatch with physical aggression. And the way I kind of laid it out in the show this morning is like, if you attack with physical aggression, you're going to get easy twos. If you get easy twos, it's untenable for the defense, so they're going to have to help. As soon as they start helping, that's where you start getting those kick out opportunities, which is the meat and potatoes of the Boston offense when they were at their best, which is wide open catch and shoot threes, right? But if you settle for jump shots in isolation situations or in post-up situations, you're going to be less efficient. And when you're less efficient, the defense is more willing to live with it. And if the defense is more willing to live with it, they're not going to help as much. If they're not going to help as much, you're going to get stagnant. You're not going to get those kick out three opportunities. And again, what makes the Celtics the best is their ability to generate easy layups and wide open catch and shoot threes. Yeah, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum can make tough shots. Yeah, Porzingis can hit face-up jump shots around the elbow, but that's not what gets them the elite offense that won them the title. They do it through physical aggression against mismatches. How did they beat Dallas? It was Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum consistently getting Luka Doncic on a switch and taking step-back threes. No, that's not it. They drove past him every damn time, and then they kicked the ball out and generated wide-open threes. You guys get the point. So like, to me, what ends up happening in these 30, 40 point dominating wins, they leverage themselves defensively, which allows them to get out and transition more. And then when they're in the half court, they play more physically aggressive, they get better shots, and they blow teams out. It is absolutely just an effort and energy thing. I also think this 5 games and 7 nights thing really affected them. We talked about that this morning. But again, like I think the dominant wins that have been mixed in have been a clear signal that they have that upside and that they're just struggling with dealing with the dregs of the regular season at this point. Hey, Jason, I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like no one is talking about how disappointing the 76ers season has been thus far. This is a team that came into the season coming off the acquisition of Paul George, ready to be a top contender in the East. However, they're sitting at the 11th seed and at the halfway point of the season. I know injuries have played a factor, but I believe they still have enough talent to be more competitive than they are. With that being said, what are your thoughts on the 76ers this season? So in the interest of full disclosure, I haven't watched a ton of them this year. I might have seen like maybe 5 or 6 Sixers games. The main thing is just how I like divvy up the amount of time that I watch film. Like I want to have a really good grasp on the teams that are in the upper tiers, like the top tier championship contenders, the second tier championship contenders, and the long shot championship contenders. I want to have like a really good feel for all of them because they're the teams that we're going to be covering very closely when we get into the postseason, which is basically a 2-month saga that we have at the tail end of all of this, right? And so like when I see teams that just are crumbled, like Philly's just crumbled. So I haven't put too much effort and energy into following them this year. That said, I'm aware of what's going on, and I have watched enough of them to see that, yeah, Paul George just hasn't been very good. And it's kind of like a tough thing because on the one hand, you almost feel like they had to do it, right? Like you have to, there's an order of operations. Operation number 1, or the first action there is like, well, we're committing to Embiid, right? Embiid's had all his playoff issues and his injury issues, but as an organization, they said, we're still going to try with Embiid. Okay, well, if you're still going to try with Embiid, you needed a talent upgrade. What was the best way to upgrade the team's talent this summer? Signing Paul George. Yeah, you're right. If you turn Paul George away, you stay away from what could be the worst contract in NBA history. I'm not disagreeing with that, but the alternative was you don't sign him and then you're still bad. So it's the kind of the same thing that we talk about, like with these. I have a question later that has to do with respect to like the Suns with Kevin Durant and them going all in, or like what we've talked about nonstop with the Warriors or the Lakers going all in. Like if you're in the LeBron James business, if you're in the Kevin Durant business, if you're in the Steph Curry business, and Joel Embiid, even though he's younger because of his body breaking down, I kind of view it as a similar type of urgent timeline. If you decide I want to be in the Embiid, KD, Steph, LeBron business, there's a certain amount of like irresponsible decision making that comes hand in hand with that, because there are super high risk options. So you kind of have to play high risk ball there, right? And so that's the thing, is like, you're right, you didn't have to sign Paul George, but he was the easiest way to add a really talented player in a tight window where you felt an urgent need to try to win a title. And so you kind of had to take that risk. And also, like, it's kind of like the Cavs thing. It's always really funny to me when people are like, oh, well, you didn't have the Cavs doing this. And it's like, none of you guys had the Cavs doing this. Like, come on, guys. Like the Cavs are greatly exceeding expectations. This is unusual. Same thing goes in reverse for a guy like Paul George, right? Like, yeah, I thought it was really dangerous to sign Paul George to that extensive of a deal at that big of a number at this phase of his career. Obviously, that was a risk. None of us thought he'd be this bad. like none of us had this dude's going to routinely put up 11 or 12 points in a game. Like none of us had that as our potential outcome for Paul George. So like some of this is like Paul George just has to get his shit together and hold up his end of the bargain. But at this point, things are just so off the rails with Embiid's health and everything. Like, this season is kind of a lost cause no matter what. So you're almost better off. Like, I wouldn't play anybody who's hurt. If Maxey has some sort of discomfort in a foot, sit his ass down. If Paul George is playing like shit because he's hurt, sit his ass down. If Joel Embiid can't do a workout without his knee swelling, sit his ass down and have the number one priority between now and October for those guys to get healthy. And then when you get to October, you say, let's try this thing one more time. And you try it, and if it goes off the fucking rails again, then maybe you consider trying to pivot off of everything in the best way that you can. And maybe that ends up you having to trade Tyrese Maxey, which would really suck. But if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. But you got to do what you got to do to make this work up until at least until you get one full season with these guys at least having some health to see what they're capable of on the court. Is it just me, or have the Timpf's tape segments been canceled? Did you say something about that, or was it just too complicated to keep doing? I plan on still doing Timpf's tape. It's just the holidays were weird because we kept having a bunch of days off in the middle of the week, and then we had another day off this week, Monday with the Martin Luther King Day. And then I've also been doing more trade deadline content. So like when I have a Tuesday or a Thursday when I want to do something different than game reactions, I've been doing a lot of like, let's cover 3 teams at the trade deadline instead of Timpf's tape. But like post trade deadline, we will absolutely get back into Timpf's tape as we start to like dive deeper into these teams. Like Timpf's tape is a very important segment to me in terms of like providing visual representations for the show. It is something that I'm still very committed to. We're just in a kind of a weird, funky spot in the season where we're not using it as much. Love your work. Watching from New Zealand. Trying to settle a debate with my friend who's a Heat fan. Who do you think is a better player, Desmond Bane or Tyler Herro? Last year, I would have said Desmond Bane. This year, I'd say Tyler Herro. For the future, it's all going to depend on whether or not the shooting from Tyler Herro is legitimate. The big thing with Desmond Bane is I actually think Desmond Bane is a pretty damn good defensive player. He's good. He's physical. He fights guys off of spots. Good ball pressure guy. Like I like Desmond Bane on the defensive end much more than Tyler Herro. And like his kind of lower trunky build makes it a little bit easier for him to get to spots. And I think that's made him just a more useful player as the intensity goes up a level. But Tyler Herro's just been shooting the ball so damn well this year and doing such a good job passing the basketball this year that he's gone up a level in terms of just overall offensive upside where he's been better than Desmond Bane this season. That said, every time I see a guy that has an outlier shooting season like this, it's like you kind of just want to see the sample size grow and grow and grow. It's kind of like the Anthony Edwards shit. Like he shot really well in the postseason, shot really well with Team USA. Now he's shooting really well again this season. Like now I'm kind of like, hey guys, Anthony Edwards is a really good shooter. Like that's kind of what we want to see with Tyler Herro is just see him put together a more extended sample of that. Why hasn't the Dennis Schroder trade worked out for the Warriors? They needed additional ball handling. He was playing so well in Brooklyn. What happened? Is the Warriors offense really that hard to play in? Is Steph really that hard to adapt to? Again, I talked about this a little bit earlier on in the show. It's just all like, and I'm not going to get too much deeper in it. Just go listen to the Warriors segment that we did earlier in the show. But the gist of it is like, I've never thought of Dennis as like a primary shot creator or even as a secondary shot creator. He needs to be your 3rd, 4th, 5th best offensive player in order for it to make sense. His value is in that in specific matchups, he can be absolutely deadly as a speed guard who can beat switches and pressure the ball and do all these different things. But like there are other matchups where he can struggle. Teams that can do a better job of packing the paint, teams that have a good enough athlete to bother his kind of slow pull-up jump shot release. But at the end of the day, like I said that when the trade was made, like he only really makes sense for this team, or he makes sense for this team no matter what as a trade for DeAnthony Melton. But the only way he really brings upside to this team is if he's not depended on to be a great scorer. And right now he is. And for the record, guys, like this is the bottom end of the Dennis Schroder experience. He's not making any contested shots right now. So like that is the main issue. Like Dennis will play better, but the bigger picture issue is that you don't need to be depending on Dennis. That's a roster problem that they need to address. Hey, Jason, love the show. Big Suns fan and even bigger Kevin Durant fan. As I watch the Suns and some of these other kind of upper middle teams, Lakers, Kings, T-Wolves, I'm asking myself specifically as a Suns fan, why are we not blowing this thing up? I don't think the fit with Beal and Book and KD is the problem. Maybe you disagree. I more think it's the money that's the problem with building a roster out of veteran minimums and how that's not a sustainable way to build a contender team. But my question is, do you think some of these upper middle teams should pull the trigger on bigger trades sooner, or if they should just blow it up and rebuild? Because a lot of these teams run it back kind of hoping something changes when clearly there's level they are levels below the top teams when every year we are talking about championships with these teams. But there just clearly is not that upside. I'm sure you feel like this with the Lakers and their 2 first-round picks. Thanks for he said, thanks, sorry for the long question. No worries at all. I was having a little trouble with that one myself. But that's just me. My brain is completely fried. We've been going all day now. Here's the thing. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to get a little bit deeper into this concept now. There's no doubt that the builds that these teams have are flawed. That building a team around a $50 million 40-year-old LeBron is going to handcuff you in some ways, or $50 million old KD, $50 million old Steph. My thing is that like you can't be in that business and then be thinking about the future. Like they just don't go hand in hand. Like to your point, the way you supplement a roster that has to overspend on stars because of their just salary slots, because they're all, 10 plus years of NBA experience, you have to compensate that by getting really high-level players at every single other salary that you have. And the only way you're going to do that is by using your draft compensation. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, I get it. I get why some Lakers fans, or not even Lakers fans, but the Laker front office might be like, man, this team doesn't look that good. Why would we spend these 2 first-round picks and handcuff our future? Or the Warriors, man, this team has looked bad at stretches this year. How do we reconcile spending 2 first-round picks spending a talented young player in draft compensation to upgrade this team? Or I'm sure if you're a Suns fan, you're like, oh my gosh, like we were already all in with this Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant thing. We're going to take our 2031 pick and we're going to turn it into 3 firsts and trade all of those too. Like we're just going to mortgage the whole future. And it's like, I get it. I get why that seems freaky. I get why that seems irresponsible, but you're not in the normal NBA business. Yeah, like teams like Cleveland and Oklahoma City, teams like Detroit that are on the rise, those teams have real big picture potential that they have to worry about. The Suns are going to be in the shitter after this era, no matter what. The Lakers are going to be in the shitter after this era, no matter what. The Warriors are going to be in the shitter after this era, no matter what. You're in the LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant business. These are all old guys that have a lot of upside. That's probably not going to show as often in the regular season, but that is absolutely still there in the postseason. There's no way you can supplement them with the amount of talent they need without making these kinds of more aggressive decisions. And I always just say the exact same thing. You're tanking no matter what. After all of this, there is a proven process to successfully doing that. You take all those useful role players you trade for and you turn around and you trade them to that year's contenders for draft compensation. You freely take on bad money from anybody who's looking to get rid of it, because you can carry bad money while you're paying draft picks. Draft picks don't make much money. So you can actually play all the guys on the low salaries and take on all these big salaries and sit them on the bench or barely use them and take on draft compensation. There is a proven pathway to asset accumulation in these kind of like transitions between championship windows. And so like my thing is like, if you're gun shy and you don't want to spend draft compensation to anchor these groups, why'd you get in the Kevin Durant business? Why'd you get in the LeBron James business? Why'd you get into the Steph Curry business? You did that as an aggressive kind of all-in type of move, right? And so from that standpoint, that's why I advocate for those types of moves. And for the record, like the Jimmy Butler trade for the Suns, I would do it. You're screwed no matter what. Why not be screwed with Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler, and Devin Booker and see if those guys can't go win? Jimmy Butler is just a much better basketball player than Bradley Beal on both ends of the floor and is a much more natural fit alongside Devin Booker and Kevin Durant in the closing five. It immediately makes you way better. I saw a video on Twitter of them talking about the number one guy in the 2031 class, and it was a little kid. You want to put Jimmy next to LeBron put Jimmy next to Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, or do you want that little kid? Like, come on, guys. What are we even doing here? I want to see what it looks like. Give it a shot. Otherwise, get out of the Kevin Durant business. Is there a scenario where Jokic finishes with the greatest statistical season, analytically speaking, of all time, finishes top 3 in scoring, rebounding, assists, and potential steals? I think that means potential assists. I don't think there's such thing as a potential steal. The Nuggets have a top 3 or 2 seed, and SGA still wins MVP. If that happens, what would SGA need to do in the playoffs to avoid what happened to Joel Embiid after his MVP win? A couple things. Like, there's always a complicated process to this. Shea had become a pretty substantial favorite because his team is way, way, way ahead in the standings. There's something crazy like 8 games up. But Jokic is just too damn good to let this not be a race. Jokic is not capable of playing lower than the level he's playing at. Like, if he's going to keep putting up 30, 20, and 15, at a certain point, you kind of have to just acknowledge that he's a better basketball player. I think everybody does. But Shea has played at an extremely high level this year. And his team is clearly the best team in the regular season right now. And it just makes a lot of sense that he's a very traditional, surefire MVP candidate. But I do still think that Jokic can steal it from him. He's too damn good. And, especially in this stretch here where the Thunder are without their centers and they could potentially drop some games. Like, it's absolutely still there for the taking, but I think Shea, if he finishes 8, 9, 10 games ahead of the Nuggets in the standings, it's just going to be too much to justify the relative. Like, I think Jokic is clearly better than SGA, but SGA's been playing at an extremely high level this year. Jason, love the show, man. Lakers-related trade question. I'm with you that plan A should be Kessler, Sexton, and Bruce Brown, but I was listening to Pete and Darius on the LFR pod, and they made a compelling case for Nikola Vucevic. He can space the floor like Rui, but he's a much better rebounder. Offensively, he can operate in the post or elbow, run pick and roll with Austin Reeves and Braun, play alongside Anthony Davis in a Marc Gasol type role, or be an innings eater when Anthony Davis sits. On the other end, Anthony Davis, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Vando in an engaged LeBron can help him defensively. What are your thoughts on the Lakers flipping Rui for Nikola Vucevic? Keep up the great work. Pete and Darius, 2 of my absolute favorites. Highly recommend you guys check out, if you're a Lakers fan and you're looking for Lakers specific work, make sure you guys check out the Laker Film Room podcast. I've told this to Pete directly, but I learned a lot about the game of basketball from my college coaches. The specific guy that I'd like to shout out is Jeff Rudder. He just ran our NAIA program like a professional program, and we just had incredibly advanced schematic approach on both ends of the floor. We used analytics. We used synergy for scouting, which allowed me. I was the guy who always had to guard the other team's best players, so it was like something that really helped. And I learned all of these things about basketball. And coming into this, to covering the NBA, there's a lot of things that do translate, and then there are things that are different. They're like the offensive talent is at such an insanely high level in the NBA that there are some defensive schematic things that you would do there that you would never do at the college level, right? And like when I was really learning about NBA basketball technically, meaning like the more advanced schematic stuff on both ends of the floor, Pete and Darius were a huge part of me learning that side of the game years ago when I was younger. And I was really ambitious about trying to get into this space. So like, highly recommend you guys check those guys out. If you're a Lakers fan and you're looking for more Lakers content, definitely get over and check out Pete and Darius. They do a lot of very similar stuff to this show where they just stay in the weeds and talk tactical stuff. Just love those guys. Can't say enough. Pete also has been a personal mentor to me on a bunch of levels. Especially when I was first getting into the business and I was really confused about some of the business side of stuff. So just shout out to Pete and Darius. But I have seen the Vucevic piece, and I am intrigued by it. I thought Pete made a compelling case. His case was basically like, this team needs offense and this team needs rebounding, and Vucevic is the guy that does both. And I agree in that respect. My only real pushback would be, I keep thinking that the Lakers need to be great at something if they're going to win the title. Like, they can be good at a lot of things, but they need to be truly great at something. And I just don't think Vooch brings enough physical in position to the equation to make it worthwhile for the Lakers to become specifically great at being big. I think the Lakers can be very big. I think if you get the right kind of backup center, someone like a Walker Kessler, someone like a Robert Williams, a guy who's a very good defensive, just versatile defensive player and rim protector and rebounder. If you have that kind of guy, and you play him next to LeBron and AD, suddenly you become a absolutely massive, incredibly difficult team to deal with physically. That's why I'm so high on that idea. Vooch, I don't think brings enough of that athletic in position, but I do think it's a viable option. Again, you have to remember, like, when we're laying these things out, like, I'd love to have Walker Kessler, Colin Sexton, and Bruce Brown. But there's a very small chance that Utah trades Walker Kessler to the Lakers. So when you acknowledge that reality, it starts to look more like, okay, you might have to look at other options. Well, there are a bunch of viable ways for you to go. Like, for instance, a simple viable, like, here's a viable way. What if you got Robert Williams and Josh Green? So you got a center that you could play alongside LeBron and AD, a center that can anchor bench units, a center that can play, that can start in games when Anthony Davis is out. And Josh Green, to me, is a higher floor version of Max Christie. I think Max Christie has a higher ceiling than Josh Green because of his offensive capabilities, but Josh Green is like a high floor option. That's an option. It's not a perfect option. I don't think it's enough of a talent upgrade, but that's an option. Just like Vucevic is an option. All of these different options are there. There's just my favorite option, which happens to be the long shot, which is that Jazz and Raptors trades, the pair of trades that I talked about. Enjoy the show and hearing you bring your personal experience to it. As a near 40-year-old still trying to get better in my men's league, I've had some decent luck watching Cade's game, how he gets to spots without superior athleticism. As you get older, are there players you watch to learn the game better? Cade's a good example. For me, all the power guys. Kawhi was a big one for me. Luka has been a big one for me. Cade. I'm bigger and stronger than most perimeter players that I play against. And so especially as I've gotten older, and it's not even just about mobility, because I still move pretty well at my age. It's a lot about energy conservation. Like, I've just figured out it's an easier way to play basketball, to use my size. And so, like, the big one there is just like using physical leverage to get to spots. So, like, in screening actions, getting angles, and then once you got a guy trapped on your shoulder, you can just kind of methodically work to where you want to go, or fighting for post position. I play out of the post so much more now than I did when I was younger. In general, instead of just slashing and trying to dunk on everybody, I'm more slowly driving to the basket and using my size. Like, I agree with you. Like, find things that fit. Find a player that has some similar physical traits to you, and then try to pick up little traits like that. All right, 2 more questions and then we're done. Hey, Jason, I asked a similar question about a month ago about Detroit. I think they're a piece or 2 away, and I was just wondering what pieces you think they'd need to get them into the next tier. Personally, I feel another 20-point-per-game shot creator and a stretch big would help, but just want your thoughts. Since I asked, Cade has elevated again without Ivy, and the Pistons are now the 6th seed. Love the show. You've helped me truly understand what I'm watching from Australia. Thank you so much for the kind words and for supporting us. It's a precarious spot for Detroit. I talked about this in another mailbag, I think last week, where I think someone pitched the idea of like trading for Cam Johnson. And like, don't get me wrong, if you can get a great deal on somebody because there's just not much of a market, make a move, right? But like, my thing is like, Cade getting awesome is exactly why you don't want to do something stupid. Cade has been awesome. He's alpha dogging dudes. He's winning huge games against good teams, looking like the best player on the floor. It's like Luka, but there's like a slashing element to him that he's had going on. He's just hooping his ass off. Cade is playing incredibly high level basketball. That's exactly why you don't want to do something stupid that compromises this window. Jaden Ivey will get back. Jaden Ivey was playing well this year. You will have opportunities in the draft to supplement this team with talent. I do think that a stretch big would help. I do think that finding a guy in the draft who's like an off-ball scorer that can kind of slot into the Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley type. Because here's the thing: eventually you have to pay everybody, and when you have to pay everybody, you can't go back to paying Tobias Harris and Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. what you pay them. Those guys are all going to be smaller deals, right? And so this is the time where you have to maintain flexibility and then start looking for that type of talent in the draft now. Because ideally, if Cade's not good enough to be the best player on a championship team now, but he will be in 3-4 years, that's when you need to be like, all the stuff is coming together at the right time for us to make a run. And so that's why you just can't get a little ahead of yourself and do something stupid in affect that window. Last question. Jason, appreciate your work. Donovan Mitchell is shooting 39.8% on 2-pointers outside of 16 feet, which is a career low and is way below his career 43.4%. He's also shooting a career low 56.9% at the rim. He shot 70% in each of the last 3 seasons. Why do you think this is? This is super concerning for their ceiling, in my opinion, if he doesn't turn the corner at some point this season. I think the change in the way the team has played in terms of pushing the ball more in transition, Darius Garland just being a really good player that they've played through a lot, and then Evan Mobley doing more initiating has just affected Donovan Mitchell's rhythm. But again, like, as long as you figure out that balance, it's kind of like we talked about with the Lakers earlier. Like, I don't think Donovan Mitchell is a good enough shot creator to be just some alpha dog, heliocentric guy. Just like I don't think LeBron is anymore. Just like I don't think Anthony Davis is. So like I talked about with the Lakers, like they almost need to have a we score mentality. And that's the mentality for the Cavs as well. Donovan Mitchell has been out of rhythm as of late. And generally this season has been down, but the Cavs offense has been substantially better. And I know I've seen Donovan Mitchell just like be able to leverage that. It's like the Celtics game where the one where they beat the Celtics in Cleveland. Like Donovan hit all the big shots he needed in that game. I still feel like Donovan is like, he hit that huge corner 3 and that step back 3 in the Thunder game late, right? In a game where he couldn't make a damn shot. He made 2 massive ones down the stretch. Like to me, Donovan Mitchell's upside is that he can create his own shot and that you don't need him to. And so, yeah, like I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's not concerning that he's down in these areas, but the offense is better, the defense is better, the team is better. I don't see any way to interpret that other than as a good thing, especially when you factor in the fact that it's rhythm related and that Donovan Mitchell is probably going to slowly get better at seeing his spot in this offense as the season progresses.